Okay. Hello, I'm Eric Dodds, and we are going to have a great time, I think. But I guess you can tell me that in the feedback. Let's see. Could someone in the comments tell me if you can hear me? Hear me okay. Okay, we got some great opinions about Google Tag Manager. Loving this. Okay, this is going to be great. We're going to love this. I'm going to assume everyone can hear me unless someone says otherwise. And I will keep the chat open. Okay, great. You can hear me. Now, the second question will be if you can see my screen here. Let me, oh, here we go. Okay. Can you, yes, can you see my screen? I will just keep the chat up here. Great. Okay. We are just going to dig right in here. So this will be, I'm going to try to cruise through this and leave at least 10 minutes, for us to chat. And actually, as opposed to showing you Tag Manager, we'll look at something much nicer, which is like a fresh, nice, fresh Gatsby blog, freshly deployed just for this workshop session. And I'll just do a really brief intro. I'm Eric Dodds. I work at Rudderstack. I work on the marketing team, and I help manage a number of different things. But one of my areas of responsibility is sort of our website and infrastructure. And we've been doing a lot of work trying to figure out problems that I have faced for years related to Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, site speed, and all that sort of stuff. And I was actually a user of Rudderstack before I joined the company. And so this is just some stuff that I figured out that's been really fun for me. And I wanted to share it with you. Today, we're huge fans of Gatsby. If you're interested, quick explanation of our stack. So we use a headless CMS called Sanity, which is awesome. And we deploy our site on Netlify, and it runs in Gatsby. It runs both our marketing site and our docs and a couple of other properties. So we're super huge fans. Okay, last housekeeping thing. And I see more polls coming in. Lots of Google Analytics, lots of Tag Manager, lots of this is too painful. There's a Q&A tab next to the chat and polls tab. So pop your questions in there. Please pop them in throughout. I'll try to keep an eye on it. But I'm going to save those to the end so we can kind of cruise through this. And if we have time, also, I'd love to show you some A/B testing cool stuff related to performance. So with that, let's get started. Okay. Let me just grab this. Okay, this is why Tag Manager is really, really painful. So this is actually, interestingly enough, we had like a landing page property that we used to like roll out some stuff really quickly. I'm sure no one's ever stubbed anything out quickly that was like, you know, not very performant and crammed with Tag Manager and all this other crap. But we did this, gosh, a long, long time ago. And it's really painful. And I don't think I have to explain like why it's painful to everyone, but just for the sake of completeness, the things that really I hated about it were right off the bat, obviously performance is a huge nightmare. It's just, you know, it really is just such a heavy script. And then you load all this other JavaScript in there, right? So for performance, it's a huge pain. But even beyond that, like actually just trying to wrangle it is really even more painful, right? Like this is, I would say, like a low to medium complexity set of tags and triggers, you know, and like you start to get into all this weird stuff, trying to make things extensible and blah, blah, blah. And like if you even get to the point of like trying to store data later variables and all that sort of stuff, you know, it just gets so messy and it's really annoying to try to manage all of that. And then the other thing that I really didn't like about it was you're sort of stuck inside the Google ecosystem, right? I mean, almost always you're using Google Tag Manager to try to wrangle things that are pretty difficult on the front end and get them into Google Analytics in a way that meets your particular needs. And it's just very painful. Google Analytics also very painful. So when you combine Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, you sort of get messy, complex, slow. And then the biggest thing, which we'll talk about, is the amount of data that actually gets blocked, because Google's sort of, the most ubiquitous JavaScript running on the web as far as the third-party provider. So anytime, any sort of, privacy sensitive browser, which most of them are becoming privacy sensitive, catch a whiff of it, it's generally the first thing to get blocked. And so one thing that we saw when we were running the Google Analytics script natively was we literally were just missing a huge amount of actual data. And for many businesses, website traffic is in many ways the lifeblood of your business. So what I thought we would do, which I think is going to be really fun, is do a live test. Now, this is a little bit risky, but I think that we probably have some pretty intrepid people here in the audience. So I am actually going to take a big risk, and we are going to do a live test here in a fresh Gatsby setup. Okay, and I'm going to show you what we're running here in Tag Manager. So this is Gatsby blog. It's a fresh container. And I really stripped this thing down to kind of like what you would consider super bare minimum. Okay, so we have a Google Ads pixel, a Facebook pixel. We're running intercom, and we have an A/B testing tool. This is VWO, but optimizely, like, pick your poison, right? And I know you can get really fancy with all of the, triggering, and you can delay things to wait until, all elements in the DOM are loaded and all that sort of stuff. But, you get into race conditions and all sorts of stuff there, right? So I just went with sort of the most vanilla setup that I possibly could, because part of the reason we want to get rid of Tag Manager is so we don't have to do any of that junk, okay? So this is what we're running here, and these are all just, it literally couldn't be more vanilla in terms of the setup here, right? So we're just running an out-of-the-box Gatsby blog and an out-of-the-box Tag Manager container. So let's run a little Lighthouse score here. So, and I'll just zoom in. I want to be sensitive to screen size. I didn't have time to submit a pull request to just change the blog post, so you're looking at literally out of the box. Okay, mobile performance here. So let's just run a test, because the two parts of this are performance and analytics. So we'll let this fire up here. Okay. Wow. So a couple interesting things here. That's not a great performance score. One thing that is like so impressive and that we love so much about Gatsby is that even though we kind of loaded this thing down with, things that we hate, look at how well Gatsby actually performs on some of the core stuff here, right? Even when we just bloat this thing down. So LCP, largest contentful paint, first contentful paint, cumulative layout shift. Like, this is a huge reason we love Gatsby. Like, it works really well, even though we bog it down with, with things that are like really heavy JavaScript and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's just zoom out here, and I will take. I'm going to take a screenshot here so I can remember this. Hold on, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. Okay, great. And feel free to pop questions in. I know, I'm guessing that people are fairly familiar with Lighthouse, but just for the sake of being complete, it's a way that it's a tool in Google Chrome that allows you to test performance on your website across a large number of variables. Okay. So we did that. Now let's take all that stuff out, and this will be like part 1 of the test, okay? And of course, I'm going to tell you what Rudderstack is, but we will talk about that when we get into the data side of it. Okay, so, and actually we can talk a little bit about it right now. So I'm running the Rudderstack JavaScript SDK on this Gatsby site via the Gatsby plugin that we have. So we have a Gatsby plugin. It's our latest JavaScript SDK, super fast and optimized, which is great. And I'm collecting data and I'm sending it to a couple destinations, and we'll look at this in a minute when we talk about the analytics. And so I'm going to remove a couple of things here. So I'm going to pull off Google Analytics 4. Oops, sorry. And then, pardon me, get a sip of water. And I am going to disable Google Tag Manager, okay? And if you're thinking, oh, interesting, you're turning those scripts off within Rudderstack, you're right. And so while I wait for the CDN to deploy the updates to the Gatsby site so that we can run another little test, I will explain Rudderstack really quickly to you, and then we'll talk about the data stuff in a minute. So Rudderstack is not a tag manager. That's the first thing that I want to say. So a lot of times people will compare it to like Google Tag Manager, in part because you can actually load certain third-party scripts via the Rudderstack JavaScript SDK. But Rudderstack is actually a tool that allows you to capture raw behavioral data and then send it to any number of downstream integrations. So I will show you what that looks like really quickly here. Okay, so I'm just going to reload the site here, and this is a live events viewer. So it's actually going to stream events from the Rudderstack JavaScript SDK running via the Gatsby plugin. And it takes a minute here because we actually don't store any data in the platform. So you actually have to tell the platform, oh yeah, this is also, I created a free account for this. So there may be a little bit of latency here. You have to tell the platform to actually stream events into the UI because we don't collect any data. There we go. Okay, so this is a Rudderstack page view payload, okay? So it captures, it's basically, you take a page view and it captures all of the relevant context and packages that into, you know, a nice structured JSON payload that we can then send downstream to any number of destinations, right? So you can say, you can see I was sending it to GA4, we're sending it to GA Classic and Cloud Mode. We'll talk about that in a second. Google Tag Manager, I named this "Oh the Horror." I think everyone on the in the session knows why. And then I'm also sending it to Mixpanel. And you can add any number of additional destinations. So there's tons of these. And I'm not trying to make this like an advertisement for Rudderstack. I'm just trying to explain how the product works, right? So if we wanted to send the data to, you know, let's say Snowflake, for example, to analyze our raw data, great, we can do that. I could send it to a webhook destination, etc. You get it. Okay, so let's see. Let's go back here and see if we've had enough time. Oh, Rowan said, good name. Man after my own heart. Okay, let's see here. Okay, it does not look like intercom is running anymore. So I think it just takes a minute when you turn those off in Rudderstack, which I'll explain in a minute. It can take a minute for our CDN to actually like update and pull those out. Okay, this is where I'm taking a little bit of risk because Lighthouse is all over the place and like so many things can affect it, and people get different mileage, but let's see what happens here. Okay, so, and let me really quickly pull up. Second. Sorry, I'm pulling up the screenshot here so we can compare it. Okay, yeah, so again, Lighthouse is a little bit challenging and like finicky and all that sort of stuff. But this is pretty crazy. Literally just by turning off Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, which included those JavaScript snippets. The difference here is pretty drastic, actually. So, and again, this is like somewhat inconsistent. We could probably try it again in incognito mode and get different results, which you may do in a second. But it's one of a couple of the things just to look at really quickly here. And it's actually weird the speed index went down. So we'll try this again. But if you look at the percentage difference in time to interactive, went from 12.9 down to 8.9 seconds. That's a 4-second difference just by removing it. And then you can also see reduce initial server response time, eliminate render blocking resources. Those were drastically decreased as a percentage, right? So especially like reduce initial server response time, just massive, massive difference there. We also had some other reduce the impact of third-party code, a number of things there that literally just removing that changed. And then I'm going to just do this really quickly. See, because Lighthouse is a really finicky beast. I debated whether to do this live or not, just because it can behave so inconsistently. Let's just try this one more time and see. Hey, there we go. Okay, so this is a much better picture. Maybe there actually may have been a couple things that they were actually loaded, but look at that. I mean, unbelievable. It took us from like tons of red down into the green. Pretty unbelievable. And that, my friends, is like probably the biggest thing for me as far as this stuff goes in terms of performance. So now the question is, and I'll cover this really quickly so that we can, I'll cover this really quickly so we can do plenty of Q&A. Okay, so the question is, okay, so I ripped out Tag Manager and I ripped out Google Analytics, but how do I still get the data, right? Like probably maybe my team or me, but like we still want to use Google Analytics. We still want to use like other tools, okay? So I will explain this really quickly. So you can see here, we disabled GA4 prod. We disabled Tag Manager, oh, the horror prod, but we're still sending data to Google Analytics. And I will actually prove that to you in just a second. We're running this in what's called cloud mode in RudderStack. So there's an option here where you can run Google Analytics in cloud mode or device mode. Device mode actually loads the Google Analytics script in there. So like I said, RudderStack's not a tag manager. It collects data, behavioral data via an SDK in raw format, and then allows you to send that wherever you want downstream. But what's amazing is because we collect it as raw data and we handle all the integrations to all the downstream tools, you can send data server side. So let me just pull this up really quick. Here we go. This is data that's being fed via RudderStack in real time to a Google Analytics property, which is pretty stinking cool. And it's all server side, right? So we're not loading any Google let's see, there's a question. I want you to run control of GTM like you did once you took out. Oh yeah, yes, I should. I will run the control here. Hold on. I can run the control in just a second. So this is being sent in real time to Google Analytics. The other thing that is super cool, and let me actually hold on one second here. Let me pull this up. Okay, hold on. Let me get the, here, while waiting for those to show up. Oh, actually, yeah, so I have to go in and turn those back on. Hold on a second. Okay, we have these showing up. So the other cool thing is it's not just page view data. So we'll do this. So I'm going to click join newsletter there. It's just a super simple form. And you can see there's an identify call here that creates a paradigm of a user, which is pretty cool. So it actually will create leads and downstream tools, you know, whether it's HubSpot, Salesforce, you know, Marketo, blah, blah, blah. Then this is also a track call, which represents the user or the actual thing that the user did. And then one thing I want you to notice here is that we included a category and label keys here in the properties of the payload, the instrument of the call. And what's neat about that is those, because we included in the properties, automatically get added to Google Analytics as events. So it's actually a fairly elegant way to, you can see like newsletter subscription there. The label is newsletter subscription. So it's a fairly elegant way to actually send events into Google Analytics as well, without having to deal with all the insanity of actually, you know, instrumenting those events directly. And then of course you can send those, you know, to any downstream tools that you want. So let's see, went a little bit past 20 minutes. So we'll do Q&A, and then while we're doing Q&A, I will wire up the, I'll turn these things back on, and then we'll run the control test. So let me see the Q&A. So Adam actually asked in the Q&A, can you control the attribution model, or in the main chat, can you control the attribution model for conversions? We don't do any attribution modeling at all. We just collect the data and send it. So you can model the data however you want in your data warehouse. We send the data to Google Analytics. You can, you know, sort of use, you know, attribution modeling there. Let's see, Nathan. Good question on the attribution modeling though. Let me go ahead and let me turn these back on because it'll take a minute. Sorry, I can't, it's hard to think and talk at the same time. Also, I encourage you to actually like benchmark this yourself. Benchmark this yourself. So we've done this, like we did it like 4 or 5 times and got just, you know, results are all over the place with Lighthouse. But we'll get the control running here for you in a second, and I'll answer questions in the meantime. Okay, is there much training need for the marketing team when switching to RudderStack? That's a good question, AJ. It depends on what the marketing team's doing. I mean, ideally, the marketing team doesn't have to do anything when you implement RudderStack. You're just getting the data there. So, I mean, if the marketing team was like instrumenting a bunch of events and all that sort of stuff in like Tag Manager, then there will be a difference. Like some of that work will actually shift to the dev team. So that's certainly something to be aware of. That's actually an advantage we hear from most of our customers. Like, because, I mean, look, I love marketing. I am a marketer, but we screw things up, right? Because we just cram a bunch of stuff into Tag Manager sort of with no regard to like the larger implications of it. So it actually makes for better data governance. Okay, a little confused on how this works with GTM. Great question. I still need GTM for running things like HubSpot. Actually, you can add HubSpot. You can run HubSpot via RudderStack. So if you're talking about loading the script, you can run HubSpot in device mode, and it will load the script for you. Again, we're not a tag manager, but when you run HubSpot as a destination, you can actually load the script. You can also run it in cloud mode to get the data. So if you run an identify call, like I showed you here, they'll pop up in a second. If you run an identify call, it'll create a lead in HubSpot. So you actually don't have to run the HubSpot code if you don't want to, but you can. How it works with GTM, the brief explanation of how Rudderstack works with GTM is that when you run track calls, which you can check out our docs for that, when you run track calls, it will you can populate data layer variables via Rudderstack track calls, which can be pretty handy depending on your implementation of GTM. Personally, I was really excited to get rid of it. Let's see, David asked, does this work the same as a similar tool, or wait, sorry, another question came in. Does this work the same as a similar tool, Segment? Yep, actually we're API compliant with Segment. So you can literally just switch out the SDK and all your events and everything will still work. Very similar, we have, actually we're running short on time here. We have some tools that are much more dev friendly and tech friendly than Segment. So one example is transformations. So you can write custom JavaScript to transform the payload in real time. One quick example of this, let's say you use Customer IO for your email tool and Salesforce or HubSpot for your CRM. Maybe one of the fields needs to be different for each of those, but you instrumented it with Rudderstack with one name. You can just change the event name live in transit with a transformation on the destination. So there are a number of things like that. You can also hit external APIs, enrich leads with Clearbit, all that sort of stuff. Let's see, another question. Julianne asked, so every tag used in GTM in a separate destination in Rudderstack? Correct. Yep, that's basically how it would work. But the other thing I would say is that the goal is actually not loading additional JavaScript, which is why we have built this so that you can send data to Google Analytics server side, right? Because why would you load the Google Analytics script unless you absolutely have to, for performance reasons? Does that make sense? Great question. Sorry, I know I'm talking so fast. I just want to make sure that I'm answering all these questions. I think I got all the questions in there. Got a thumbs up. Okay, let's see. Let's see how. Let's see if Lighthouse is gonna make me look awesome or make me look horrible with the control. Oh, whoops. Okay, it's there. I am incognito. Thanks for the call out on that, by the way. I was trying to move through this really quick because 30 minutes is pretty tight. And I think we loaded all the other junk on here. Yeah, we're enabled. Okay, there you go. Oh, dang, I didn't take a picture of the last one. Okay, well, sorry. One thing you can see is that the time to interactive is still pretty massive. So there's a huge saving there. I believe that was green last time, and I should have taken a screenshot. Sorry, but there's the control. So you can see actually this is again just another hats off to Gatsby. Like it's a pretty resilient, pretty great framework. And as we all know, JavaScript tends to be like one of the biggest culprits. And so pulling all that junk out is really helpful. So I think we're right at the buzzer. Oh, one quick thing, everyone. Also, we have a free t-shirt waiting for you. If you go to rudderstack.com/Gatsby, rudderstack.com/Gatsby, we will send you a free shirt, and it's a super cool shirt. So please go there, request a shirt. We'll send it your way. And it was great chatting with everyone. I had a really great time. Yeah, I think this is 30 minutes, right? Are we going longer than that? I think it was just 30 minutes. Thanks for joining. Also, my email is eric@rudderstack.com. So feel free to email me. Here. And happy to answer any additional questions. Rudderstack.com/Gatsby. And thank you. This is great. Thanks for dealing with the live Lighthouse live Lighthouse test. Doing controls in Lighthouse live is always a little bit nerve-wracking. So I appreciate your patience. And Alex, thank you for the call out on that. But yeah, time the JavaScript stuff and time to interactive, the pain point is massive there. Seconds and seconds and seconds. So thank you, everyone. And I'm not really sure. I guess I just leave this running. I'll hang out if anyone wants to ask any questions for a few minutes, but I'm sure you have some other stuff to go to. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for the thank yous. Again, I'll hang out here for a minute to answer any questions. Any questions? Let me know. How does this compare to the the new GTM server release? That's a great question, Alex. Actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this publicly, but we're all friends. So I actually think we're working on building some stuff that's part of that ecosystem so you can just use it with Rudderstack. Because I can see how that's like very helpful. I can see how that's very helpful for people. This is just my personal thought on that, like as someone who has tested it out and who also uses Rudderstack every day. The big thing, and I used to do a ton of consulting before I joined Rudderstack, it is very freeing to be able to shape your own JSON and have that be the foundation of your event structure, and then have the option to send it wherever you want, as opposed to being completely reliant on an ecosystem like Google's ecosystem. Now, the new Google Tag Manager is so, like, the new server-side stuff, the new server-side Tag Manager stuff is worlds beyond like where it was, and like for all the problems that we just discussed. It's also still pretty new, and it's still sort of, you still sort of have to operate within the rules that Google sets for that ecosystem. Now, admittedly, they're much more flexible, but as we see companies grow, their stacks become more complex, especially around anything like deep integrations with like a data warehouse, or like lots of our customers are using Redis more and more to do interesting things in their stack. It's a little bit harder, and in many cases, a lot of it harder to do a lot of those things with just within the Google ecosystem, right? Like they're always going to favor direct integrations like with their stack, and it's just a lot more flexible. So that's what we've seen and heard from our customers. Obviously, that's biased because I work for Rudderstack, but I'm a huge fan of option value, right? Like I want the option to work within like Google's new server-side stuff and send data there if I want. But I also want the option to like completely remove that infrastructure, you know, if I need to for whatever reason. But great question, Alex. Any other questions? I don't know if I'm allowed to be going this long, but I'm happy to. Yeah, great question, Alex. We'll give that a thumbs up. Any other questions? I see a few people still in here. It's about 5 after. All right, going once, going twice. All right, shoot me an email, eric@rudderstack.com, rudderstack.com/Gatsby for your shirt. It's been great.